So I was talking to one of my friends from college last night, and he said to me, Bintel, it's important that you tell people why you're doing what you're doing instead of what you're doing, because if you tell them why you're doing something, they'll understand a lot about you and it'll build more trust. So I want to tell you a story about a foundational African American person that basically saved my life. And if it wasn't for these people, very famous people, somewhat famous, well, not famous enough. I hope this really helps people to know who they were. This formula that I think is critical, not just to black people, but to all people, because politically, all politicians come in office saying that we're going to get you jobs. We're going to create 100,000 jobs. Donald Trump is telling people we're going to get you all these jobs, right? And poor people, white or black, are voting for him because we need to bring jobs back to the U.S. There are going to be no jobs. This is Armageddon. So I just want folks to understand why this is critically important and why I'm doing this above and beyond my own well-being and my own ability to profit. So I'm a kid I moved from Houston or Uniondale to Houston and back to New York to this town called Westbury. And I'm a kid and I come to this town and I think I'm gonna become popular and I'm gonna start fights, and this was my tool. I was literally like a modern day Nick Cannon. Right? I'm really a book nerd, but I present myself in this new town, my new start on life. I'm going to have friends now because we're moving around all over the place. I didn't really have friends, and as a kid, that's all you want. And I decide to start fights in this new town and come off as like a tough guy and get myself into a lot of trouble, get jumped, get beat up, right? But it actually works. Horribly, it works. As horrible as the story was, it worked because I'm a kid, and kids are stupid. They'll cling to anything, especially violence. So violence is an erotic commodity in the black community, or in poor communities, white or black. Everybody loves MMA and boxing. Floyd Mayweather makes hundreds of millions of dollars. People love fighting, so I use it as a vehicle, literally as a popularity vehicle. And I'm growing out of it, and I'm about to go to college. Everybody in Westbury are the guys that I'm hanging around with in my side of town. All the second generation light-skinned college grad. It's like some episode of Spike Lee's School Days, right? And my mother's trying to send me away to college. And this light-skinned guidance counselor named Mrs. Winter will not put my college application. And she's like, no, Bintel's a troublemaker. He's a hoodlum. We're sending him to the Army. My mother is crying now. So flashback, I'm in Uniondale before we'd moved to Texas, and I used to see this woman. Her name was Miss Sleet. If she caught you in the halls she would literally run up behind kids and put her foot up their ass. I saw her kick one of the most dangerous kids in Uniondale in the ass with her high heel shoe. She was a light-skinned woman. She used to wear her hair. She had like blonde streaks in her hair back then. And she was a very light-skinned woman, but she was mean. I was terrified of her. I would come home and tell my Ma, Miss Sleet kicked this guy up the backside in school today and my mother would be like, well, can we call her so she can kick you up the ass? My mother. All right. So my mother, I'm in Westbury now. My mother's crying, and we go to church. My mother changes from like this Baptist church to this new type of religion called the Unitarian movement, right? And we go to this church in Valley Stream. She used to take me because my mother was experimenting with new forms of religion. She didn't like this whole white Christianity, go to hell. She'd come from Jamaica, and that's a whole other story. And lo and behold, we walk into the church, and Miss Sleet is there. It's like an episode of the Bill Cosby Show with Miss Westlake. I'm like, oh my God, right? But Miss Sleet, surprisingly, is super nice. She's like the sweetest woman. She comes up to me. I'm terrified. She walks up to me and hugs me and pulls me to her bosom and starts hugging me and, oh, Bintel. She knows my name. So Miss Sleet becomes almost like my godmother. And I'm going to tell you who Miss Sleet is. right? So so this woman, Miss Winter, that's what this is all going to come in. Who Miss Sleet is. These are very serious, foundational black women. Her and her husband, Mr. and Mrs. Sleet. The sweetest man. He had this puffy face, and he had these Chinese eyes. You couldn't even see his eyes. He was just always smiling at you with his cheeks. Sweetest couple in the world. I thought that they were, I mean, they were like Winnie the Pooh, the two of them. Like they were just always so happy. And I was like, who is this woman that used to beat kids up in Uniondale when she caught them not going to class? Well, this woman, Miss Winter, this guidance counselor, won't put my application in. So my mother is crying, and she takes me to church, and she tells Mr. and Mrs. Sleet what Mrs. Winter is doing. No, Bintel is going to the army, that's it. He's a dark-skinned black ass. We tried to put him in the special ed classes, and some Italian man put him in the Regents classes, and even though he looks like he can get accepted into Northeastern, no, I'm not putting his application in. Well, my mother tells Miss Sleet this, and Miss Sleet and her husband turn into the Miss Sleet that I once knew. They surrounded my mother, surrounded her, and they're like, who? I still remember Miss Sleet. Who, goddammit? Who? Tell me her name. And even Mr. Sleet, her husband, who was this puffy-eyed, friendly man, he turned into a monster. And they surrounded her. It was like, write her name and her number down right now. I went to school that Monday, not even remembering this. And Miss Winter pulled me into her office. My application was done and submitted. They threatened they were going to beat Miss Winter's ass, it looked like. I was scared for Miss Winter. I think they were really going to come to the school and beat her up. Seriously. So who is Mr. and Mrs. Sleet? Mr. and Mrs. Sleet, foundational African American people, not like you, not like these Negroes twerking on TV these days. When Martin Luther King was murdered and his wife was in the church, and that picture of the little girl on his wife's knee crying, and that picture was taken by Mr. Moneta Sleet. He was the photographer that chronicled the civil rights movement in the 60s. Moneta Sleet. And this is why Miss Sleet would walk around kicking people up the ass to go to class. And if it wasn't for her, they threatened Miss Winter. They threatened to beat her ass. I'm pretty sure they did. I would have never gotten into Northeastern. And this formula that I know will save our children would never be. I'm right now know Moneta Sleet is looking down on me, smiling right now, telling this story. And when Bill Cosby's final just to show you how important this guy is, when Bill Cosby's final episode aired, I'm getting chills telling this story, and Bill Cosby's in the bleachers and Theo is graduating. If you watch that episode, the little light-skinned man with the sleepy eyes, that was Moneta Sleet. You look him up. So I cannot stop doing what I'm doing. I'm going down with this ship. And if that means threatening these principals and teachers in the public schools and going to meetings and telling them what you're doing to their kids, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.